Hello, my name is Frank, and today is February 10th, 2024, and I think today is a good day for me to read the letter. I've got this letter back here that I've got an example of a letter that I had sent to principals after I thought I had been fired from my previous school bus driving job. Before I open this letter, there's some important things that I want to say, though. The first thing, and hopefully this won't take too long, the first thing that I want to emphasize is within this letter, I'm going to be talking about, or I'll be reading about, I believe it was called Networks of Predators. I'll be saying that I believe in the letter it says I refer to the school bus industry festering with networks of predators. And I realize that could scare people, that could scare especially parents, and that scared parents might react irrationally. So before I open up the letter, I just want to say that if you believe that the school bus driver that your child is riding with might be part of a network of predators, you really don't want to engage in vigilante justice. I would say that a better option would be to contact your principal, or if you feel more comfortable contacting local police, they might be helpful. State police might be even more helpful, given that if your school bus driver drives in different cities or different villages, your local police department might not be able to address what happens in your neighboring village, whereas a state police officer, I believe, might be more able to piece together what's happening in your village and what's happening in a neighboring village. So a state police, talking with state police might be more powerful for you than talking with local police. But if you feel very comfortable talking with a local police officer, maybe that's your best bet. If you feel very comfortable talking with a principal about the situation, maybe that's your best bet. But vigilante confrontation of the school bus driver, I would say, is not your best bet. I would say a better strategy is to give the bus driver enough rope to hang himself. Obviously, in doing that, you wouldn't want to create an attractive nuisance, but I would say a better strategy than vigilantism is give the bus driver enough rope to hang himself, and get other people involved, like the principal or the local police department or the state police department. Speaking of vigilante justice, there's another kind of justice that I'm very quick to point out to my students, and that's called school bus justice. And what I'm doing there, when I describe to my students school bus justice, I'm trying to disillusion my students. My goal when I talk about school bus justice is to help them realize that school bus justice is never going to be perfect. The odds are stacked against school bus justice being perfect. One of the things, it takes a couple of sentences to explain to the kids, but one of the things that I point out is in most jurisdictions, the justice building, the courthouse, costs in the millions of dollars. the school bus doesn't cost in the millions of dollars. The judge making the verdict is paid a lot more than the school bus driver. The lawyers are paid a lot more than the school bus driver. On the school bus, when the school bus driver is trying to repair a situation so that things seem fair for the students who got involved in a conflict, know that that school bus driver is actively driving a vehicle when the conflict occurs and doesn't have the luxury of lawyers or high pay or a courthouse in handing out the verdict. Doesn't even have the luxury of excess time. The school bus driver has to get those students to school in a reasonable amount of time, or else they're going to be taken off that route. Be late, arrive late to school enough times, and you'll be taken off that route. So, one of the first things that I point out to the students is school bus justice is not going to be excellent justice. Almost certainly. School bus justice will not be excellent. But what the driver says the students need to adhere to so that we can get the kids to school in a reasonable amount of time. And I think most parents can understand what I've just said. I hope it might open up your, help you realize that, if you think that the school bus driver has not been fair to your student, to your child, there might be a good reason for that, and it's just that the school bus is not set up to act as a courthouse. So it's the goal is to get the kids to school, and then if the students really feel that they've been cheated, they can talk it out with a teacher or with a principal in a stationary building that's not trying to avoid other vehicles. I hope that makes sense to you, so that you can kind of cut your school bus driver some slack if you think that your school bus driver has been unfair. Part of the reason why that's so important is because the school bus industry acknowledges that there's no quicker way to create a behavioral issue within a student than for the student to feel that he's been treated unfairly. So, given how important it is for students to feel that they've been treated fairly, I'm very quick to point out to my students that school bus justice can very easily become disappointing to students. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope you won't try to engage in vigilante justice regarding any offenses that you think your school bus driver may or may not have been involved in. Let's go ahead and open up this letter that I wrote when I thought that I had been fired, and almost certainly I mistakenly thought that I had been fired about 20 years ago from my school busing employment about 20 years ago. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera around. Let's try to do this. This should be the easy part. And we got lots of shadows. Nuts. Okay, well, up there we don't have so many shadows. How about over there? That might be a better angle. Okay, so I've got this letter, and you can see I sent it certified. I sent about a dozen or 2 dozen or maybe even 3 dozen of these letters out to warn principals about some of the nonsense that was going on at the school bus depot that I was working at. You can see that my return address, This one came back to me, and it said it came back to me because that principal was no longer at that school as of July 6th of 2005. We can look at the stamp, U.S. postage, July 5th of 2005, amount of $965. It was sent to Principal Dan Bertrand at Caneland High School, 47 West, looks like 326 Kesslinger Road in Maple Park, Illinois. Let's go ahead and open it. And my camera only records in 20-minute increments. So anything longer than 20 minutes means that I'll have to reset my camera. Let's try to open this. I don't see why it's so hard. Okay, so now we're going to pull out the contents, and what you'll see is a little bowl right over here, and you can see that that little bowl, when you pull out the contents, is looking directly at Principal Dan Bertrand of Caneland High School. And the idea behind that is he's looking at me as Frank DiTillo, and he's also looking in the direction of Principal Dan Bertrand. And the idea behind that is to convey that right now a very aggressive entity is coming after me for having done a good job, and they might have their sights set on you as well as me, because chances are you're doing a good job too. And it didn't make sense to me until I met with one police officer. I met with several police officers, but one police officer in specific. What he said to me made so much sense that it ended up in this letter. So let's go ahead and see what we've got here. It's been about 20 years, so I don't remember exactly what we've got in here. Look at that. I did include it. We carry the nation's future. We carry the nation's future. Hopefully, that's a good thing. Hopefully what they're doing is they're showing that the school bus company realizes that they carry the nation's future, and so they're trying to protect that future. However, given that many school bus companies are multinational corporations, suppose that, and I don't even know which country Laidlaw was run out of. I don't know if it's England or Russia or China. I don't know which one. Never took the time to find out. I think I took the time to try to find out, but never did actually find out what nation they're run out of. Could even be the USA. I don't know. But you can see how if it was Russia or China, realizing that they carry the nation's future, that could be problematic. So that's part of what I showed. And backward serpentine. Okay, so this rodeo was a competition of bus driving skills. Backward serpentine, possible points 200. I scored 195. Serpentine, 50 points. I scored 50 points. That's kind of important because there was an accident that I'm convinced my safety supervisor tried to set up for me. A collision that I believe my safety supervisor tried to get me involved in. And these two skill sets were very helpful in me avoiding that collision that I believe the safety supervisor wanted me to be involved in. So the backup test, purpose of the test is designed to determine the driver's ability to judge distance and to steer a school bus using the mirrors. The serpentine test, purpose of that test is designed to determine the driver's ability to steer a school bus in close limits. My mirrors were crucial in avoiding the collision, and I was in very close limits when the collision nearly occurred. Anyhow, let's go ahead and flip it over and get to the easy part of just reading the letter. Okay. So, I'm going to focus in. Actually, at this point in time, before I do that, I'm going to show this second letter. The second letter is basically identical to the first letter, with the exception that it shows, it also includes the names of the safety supervisor and of the two dispatchers. There were 3 managers who I felt were in the business for reasons other than the safety and well-being of the students. But in this letter, I don't name those people, I just tell their positions. Inside this envelope, I do name those people. It's identical letter to this, but with their names printed, so that if the faculty wanted to go after the people straight ahead, they'd have that option. At this point in time, I don't plan to open this. I don't see any real point in naming those 3 individuals. My goal right now isn't to try to keep students safe from those 3 individuals. My goal right now is to keep students safe from roughly, I'm guesstimating, roughly about 3,000 school bus professionals, drivers, or managers in the school bus industry. And the way that I came up with the number of 3,000 roughly is I'm thinking within the school bus industry, there's probably about 1% of the school bus, quote, professionals who would be part of the network of predators. So 250,000 school bus drivers, roughly, I would say, are not part of the network of predators. I would say a very small percentage, like roughly 1%, might be involved in the network of predators that are mentioned in this letter. Okay, let's go ahead and we're at 19 minutes now, so I'm gonna go ahead and restart the camera, and then we will move forward. Okay, I have restarted the camera. I'm gonna zoom down to make it easier to read. Okay, you can see that the letter is addressed to area principals, dated June 2nd, 2005, by Frank DiTillo, with the P.O. Box of 7753, Aurora 60507, regarding student safety and well-being during pupillage and onerous supervision tangling bus drivers. Okay. copy to some civil authorities, some educational authorities, some evidently intrepid civilians, with nameless primer if primer. So, I'm guessing that what I did, some evidently intrepid civilians, those would be some parents, or this was 20 years ago, some people who I thought were very concerned about student safety and well-being, whether they're parents or local news. Trying to think who else would be intrepid civilians, like local news reporters. Anyhow, I'm not going to waste any more time on that. Dear area principals, last year I sent letters to many principals in this area. The letters urged authorities to familiarize themselves with and value a corporate pledge which indicates some in the school bus industry agree to behave ethically and responsibly. The letters also indicated 3 supervisors, then integral to this region's school busing transportation, behaved in ways which seemed troubling. Oh, the then integral. So I don't know if they've left or not. I reasonably expect principals to provide for student safety and well-being. I reasonably believe principals arrange responsibilities among agents such as teachers, cooks, and bus drivers. Much responsibility which you might have thereby placed in my charge, I feel I can now adequately relinquish back to your direction. I ask you to consider reading the primer of onerous supervision, which is located on separate but included paper. It identifies some troublesome, topical school busing industry supervisors. By providing the 3 names, the primer might further help deter misdeeds. Yet I reasonably doubt the following supervisor techniques are unique in the industry. Accordingly, some paragraphs penned here upon this page help tie misdeeds to some specific school busing industry positions or industry actions, suspected deployments, which I'd witnessed or experienced as a school bus driver. Perhaps trends can be found. So again, right now today in 2024, what I'm trying to address are the trends among the roughly 3,000 school bus industry people that I'm guesstimating would qualify as being within the predatory networks. Okay, let's move on. Adults might accept some transmogrification or jive can be comical. In other words, lies can be comical. Having witnessed wrongful evasions of allegations, in other words, people denying what I alleged, having witnessed wrongful evasions of allegations, I've become reasonably concerned larger interests seeking social degeneration may lamentably influence some vulnerable, key school busing staffers. Not less than one image, which corporate authorities like reviewed, seems to evidence something perhaps reasonably unexpected. Some corporate authorities, perhaps glibly, dismiss due concerns of school buses transforming into things of aggression. You really don't want a school bus to be something aggressive. Disguising aggression, humbugging, seems a skill realized by some wily tricksters. Students don't always separate school buses from academia. School bus carriers can, even passively, elicit substantial student hatred regarding going to school. School bus carriers can readily marry indigence and societal hatred effortlessly. Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to remind people that on January 6th, forget exactly what year it was, but on January 6th, recently, there was a lot of protests at the White House and by Congress. There was a lot of disgruntled people. So I'm going to repeat that sentence. School bus carriers can, even passively, elicit substantial student hatred regarding going to school. School bus carriers can readily marry indigence and societal hatred effortlessly. Such hatred directly benefits spurners of self-determination, even terrorists. I feel real, aggressive sabotage involving the real school bus transportation of real, vulnerable pupils is dangerous rather than comical. Okay, I just gotta stretch my back a little bit because it's not the most... Sorry about that. Give you some time to catch up. In fact, I'll just reread that whole paragraph. Adults might accept some transmogrification or jive can be comical. Having witnessed wrongful evasions of allegations, I've become reasonably concerned larger interest-seeking social degeneration may lamentably influence some vulnerable, key school busing staffers. Not less than one image, which corporate authorities likely reviewed, seems to evidence something perhaps reasonably unexpected. I know what I'm referring to there. This little school bus that looks very aggressive, that image had been okayed by Laidlaw. In other words, somebody at Laidlaw did not object to their school buses looking highly aggressive. Okay. Somebody at Laidlaw was at least subconsciously okay with their school buses being aggressive things or being portrayed as aggressive things. Disguising aggression, humbugging, seems a skill realized by some wily tricksters. Students don't always separate school buses from academia. School bus carriers can, even passively, elicit substantial student hatred regarding going to school. School bus carriers can readily marry indigence and societal hatred effortlessly. Such hatred directly benefits spurners of self-determination, even terrorists. I feel real, aggressive sabotage involving the real school bus transportation of real, vulnerable pupils is dangerous rather than comical. Okay, moving on to the next paragraph. On April 25th, 2003, excessive negligence seemed evident of seemingly onerous supervisors. Accordingly, I durably sought to file and I obtained a police report in the case students or their supporters wanted testimony. Request for KC report number 03-10209 might still yield the information. Again, I don't know if that report that I filed is still available or not, but I filed a police report against my employer. against some of the managers at my place of employment. Okay, S1 and S3. S1 and S3 are supervisors, supervisor number 1 and supervisor number 3, who are not named in this letter, but who are named within this envelope. S1 and S3 may be well evidenced as the culprits. S1 was likely in dispatch capacity, and S3 was likely in safety supervisor capacity. As I'd left the bus yard for the police station, some of my actions helped neutralize my reasonable fear of bus yard hostilities, but resulted in my receiving a contested write-up on work behavior and accountability issues. Basically, I parked the bus as quickly as I could when I got to the yard. I didn't park it where it belonged. I parked it as close to my car as I could, got in my car, and got the hell out of there so I could go file a police report. Bus yard hostilities, but resulted in my receiving a contested write-up on work behavior and accountability issues. During the union witness meeting, I explained I'd no longer be available to drive under the supervision of S1. The then branch manager honored my choice and readily employed me among less offensive dispatch routing supervision, where S2 tolerably shared routing and dispatch authority with others. In other words, I said the supervisor that I had just worked with, who put me in this situation where I filed the police report, I don't want to work with that person anymore. And the corporation said, the general managers, the corporation, the authorities above these supervisors said, Frank, that's okay, we'll get you a different route. After I had filed the police report against those supervisors. The then branch manager honored my choice and readily employed me among less offensive dispatch routing supervision, where S2 tolerably shared routing and dispatch authority with others. Moot concerns regarding S3 seemed endurable, since S3 misdeeds seemed likely to empower consequence. In other words, I had requested to be moved from beneath one supervisor to another supervisor, but I would still be subject to S3. But given that S3 had just witnessed what I had just done to S1, I felt I could deal with S3 because S3 misdeeds seemed likely to empower consequence. In other words, I didn't feel like I was unempowered in dealing with S3 because I had just become empowered in dealing with S1. Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. Well before September of 2003, S3 casually, but likely as safety supervisor, suggested I should, as a game, try to minimize distance clearance from curbs, especially on turns. On or around September 1st of 2003, I failed to minimize clearance on a curve on northbound Route 31 near Mooseheart Road. I can tell you that this intersection has since been expanded. It's now wider than it was in September 1st of 2003. But let me continue reading. There was, in other words, construction enabled Route 31 to become wider at Mooseheart Road. S3 seemed to notice, yet seemed to take an oddly considerate and oddly uncritical attitude about the likely apparent insubordination. Okay. Sight blocking trees may arguably justify my foible at the tropical curve. So maybe that's a reason why S3 took a seemingly uncritical attitude about what I did. But I observed S3 smiling. Smiling S3 seemed to grasp my timely glance and communications and quickly seemed to shun clarification endeavors. In other words, she was kind of happy that I had not hugged that curve. Shunned clarification endeavors as S3 motioned as if perturbed and nodded down. So she just wanted me to keep driving, just continue driving is basically what she's doing there. Despite my concern reprimand might be postponed until en route, S3 seemed oddly okay, seeing an attempt to convey hopes of mastering the curve. So, I believed I don't have the mental capacity right now to delve into this parenthetical statement. I'm just going to continue reading. I'm getting tired. But the bottom line is that the safety supervisor, instead of admonishing me for having strayed far from the curve, she was okay with the fact that I had strayed far from the curve, which seemed odd, because she would usually be in the habit of condemning anything that I would do wrong, but this straying far from the curve did not receive condemnation. Okay, let's go back to reading. My real attempt had been to indicate why mirror use seemed difficult on the curve. Again, those bushes. Belated topical broaching involved S3, as if jesting, copying my body movements of September 26th. I don't know why I'm talking about that at this point. Man, I am really exhausted. Okay. I am going to reset the camera because we're approaching 19 minutes again. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reset the camera. And I'm just going to continue reading. Okay, so I'm back to reading again. Let's see if I can reread that sentence and try to make sense out of it. See where I'm going with it. My real attempt had been to indicate why mirror use seemed difficult on this curve. And again, that was because of the bushes, the trees and the bushes. Belated topical broaching. So later on, S3, as if jesting, copying my body movements of 9/26/03. That would be the day that the collision nearly happened. Belated topical broaching involved. So S3 broached the subject belatedly. The safety supervisor belatedly broached the subject of the near accident by jesting and copying my body movements. During that near collision, I had unintentionally panicked lots of my passengers while I drove there on 9/26/03. Again, this was at the then very narrow intersection of northbound Route 31 at Mooseheart Road. And while I drove there, as another yard's school bus with students waited to turn left onto Mooseheart Road. So not only my bus had students, but the other bus also had students. Now, I don't know if I address it in this letter or not, but I can tell you that bus, I don't think I've ever seen that bus at that intersection at that time ever before. So part of the reason why it feels like this was a very unusual setup. Another yard school bus with students waited to turn left onto Mooseheart Road. And conceivably that could be explained by a charter or an unusual circumstance. But when you add in the unusual circumstance of my safety supervisor not condemning my straying from the curb, it just seems like she really wanted that accident to happen. Okay. At the curve, under prescriptive right-of-way conflicts, stopping the bus is an unusual but a near most advisable recommendation. In other words, the two lanes were so close to each other and so packed tightly that stopping the bus would seem like a smart thing to do, and waiting for that bus to turn left. I'd lacked the recommendation until 9/29/03. Okay, so on 9/29/03, while talking with somebody agreed with me that stopping the bus would have been the right thing for me to have done on 9/26. But I reasonably fear on 9/2/03, the safety supervisor likely sought, via analogy, to undermine deft behaviors regarding prescribed conflict potentials. Contrary to classroom bus driving training I'd received, and contrary to the advisable recommendation for northbound Route 31 near Mooseheart Road on the morning of 9/2, northbound Mooseheart Road, on the morning of 9/2, my then evident deaf braking behavior was wrongly partly discouraged by S3 during an analogous circumstance. I concede I may have originally misinterpreted the language of S3's smile, wave, frown, and head tilt from September 1st. I reasonably retrospect. The safety supervisor may have felt seen, unexpectedly caught, delighting in thoughts of simultaneously discrediting the perceived trustworthiness of the then branch manager. That would be the person who I trusted. So she would be simultaneously discrediting the perceived trustworthiness of the then branch manager, of judges from the 2002 rodeo competition, of myself. She would be discrediting myself, and of another same union represented bus yard in perhaps a collision involving mismanaged inertias near or at the curve. In other words, if that one accident had happened, if I had mismanaged my inertia and struck the other bus, she would have immediately been able to discredit me, the branch manager, the judges of the rodeo competition, and the driver of that other bus. School buses are often astonishingly durable, but accidents involving their passengers can readily discredit bus drivers in the minds of parents. So, on November 26, 2005, when a ladenless hauler nearly forced off the road the loaded bus I was driving, I quickly documented the incident and left the documentation in S2's charge for S3. In other words, I handed it to the dispatcher to give to the safety supervisor. Despite the safety supervisor voicing to the contrary, the safety supervisor evidently failed to responsibly send the document to police for investigation. Thereby, the safety supervisor seems to have further crammed dangers into what had been my route. I reasonably grew to distrust some of S2's, the second dispatcher. I reasonably grew to distrust some of the dispatcher's actions. For instance, on December 4th of 2003, a day I'd broadcasted or radioed concern of possible sabotage to my bus, I reasonably believe that dispatcher, S2, felt something about freezing bus yard window washer solvent was comical. In other words, laughed off my concern about the coldness freezing the washer solvent. I significantly modified my view regarding my working environment and my recourse against misdeeds on or around December 9th of 2003. In other words, around December 9th of 2003, something big happened, and let's see what it says. I significantly modified my view regarding my working environment and my recourse against misdeeds on or around December 9th of 2003. I still feel BASE's response regarding a December 8th radio malfunction isn't copacetic. In other words, what they're saying about the radio communications doesn't make sense, about the failure of the radio communications. Just doesn't make sense. Towards creating dialogue regarding lesser suspected sabotage, I encouraged my middle school passengers to tell their parents. So on December 9th of 2003, I encouraged the riders on the bus on that day to tell their parents, summarily, the bus driver fears, and I effectively described relatively benign sabotage. In other words, probably sabotage to the radio. I indicated my actions were not prompted by the pupils, those whom I was struggling to ask to raise unsettling concerns, which could result in a new bus driver, perhaps even the next morning. In other words, as I'm telling these students that something's not right here, something smells really fishy about what's going on here, I'm thinking to myself, chances are I'm going to lose this route. But I'm thinking to myself also, I owe it to the kids, I owe it to the parents to let people know quickly that something's not right here. So, in reasonable summary, treacherous safety supervisor actions plus other sabotage depressed otherwise reasonable hopes of providing safe service in the new position. In other words, the position that I had gotten to get me away from the other supervisor were now being sabotaged in such a way that I was no longer hopeful that I'd be able to safely transport these students. Absent the retrospect, the then branch manager terminated my employment in a manner which likely appeased the hostile safety supervisor, the reported going back to the police report, the reported dispatcher and others. So to me it seemed like the general manager, the branch manager, decided to terminate my employment to appease the safety supervisor and the dispatcher who I'd reported in the police report. Of course, later on I found out that it's most likely that branch manager almost certainly did not fire me, did not terminate my employment. Instead, it was forged by someone who chose to include a porn site beneath the signature, an email address to a porn site beneath the signature. While newsworthiness of the topical area bus accidents hasn't been much evidenced on TV, in other words, I hadn't seen any TV reports of accidents, it remains ever expected. I continue to reason some of the actions of S1, S2, and S3, in other words, the safety supervisor and the two dispatchers, evidence intentions to tangle students in a crash, most likely. I'm now reasonably concerned the safety supervisor and the two dispatchers enjoy substantial, deceitful corporate bracing. In other words, corporate knows about this, and they're helping these people via some authorities at their corporate headquarters. Especially during these calm remediations. In other words, I didn't try to deal with anything in a vigilante manner. Everything I did was going to the authorities and letting the authorities know about what was going on. Especially during these, I pray, strive, and hope, calm remediations. I thank you for your time and for your efforts to provide a safe environment in which pupils are civilly expedited in stowing skills for a responsible adulthood. Okay. I'm exhausted. Sincerely, Frank A. Datillo, former bus driver, July 4th, 2005. And then, so for this little asterisk, it says here, names are provided in the primer of onerous supervision, which I reasonably believe was received by my former employer's topical branch office and by its corporate headquarters around June 7th of 2005. In other words, before I sent this out to principals, I sent something similar to the corporate headquarters. Two asterisks next to each other. I've read this on the camera. I'm really exhausted right now. I don't know where the two asterisks are within my paper, but somewhere they were. Those whose decisions insinuate they might abet those who bully. This is going back to up here. So up here is where I should have two asterisks somewhere around here. Looking for the two asterisks. I don't see them. Okay, I'm not sure where I put the two asterisks. Could it be on the other side? Okay, let's look at the three asterisks. Former bus driver for three asterisks. Defrauded. Okay. So the 3 asterisks, former bus driver, 3 asterisks. The bus driver has been defrauded, distressed, and libeled into wrongful termination by saboteurs employed by my former employer who, as shown above, seem braced against labor and man. I don't know if that branch has ever gone union or not, but I do know that they fought tooth and nail to keep the unions out. Wish I could find the... Oh, here it is. Here's the 2. Deceitful corporate bracing via some authorities and their corporate headquarters. So those whose decisions insinuate via reasonably suspected aggressive or degenerative deployments, they might abet those whom bully, perhaps gouge specific pupils, the nation's future, or self-determination. In other words, some really bad people seem to be protecting some really bad people. Some really bad corporate people seem to be protecting the bad dispatchers and the bad safety supervisor. That's it. That's all I've got for this letter. I said that I would do it. It's been under an hour. It's done. I think I can go ahead and load this up to YouTube like I promised and just be done with it. Thanks for your concern. Thanks for watching. Bye. Okay, well, I guess I'm not done. I sat down and I read this seal here, and it looks like inside that envelope is not what I thought it was. It's not just a version of this that has the offender's names, but it may be a nameless summary, or it may even include it may be a summary of letters to Duquesne principals that I probably sent, let's see, a month prior to sending this. Again, it's been about 20 years, so see if we can zoom in on this. Come on, little camera. Camera's kind of old, so its autofocus isn't working perfectly anymore. This might be the best I can do. Okay, let's see if I can read that. This pocket primer displays a nameless summary, so it's either talking about this sticker or it's talking about the letter inside this sticker, this green sticker. If I open it up and I see names, there's a good chance that I won't read it with the names. There's a good chance I won't show it with the names. Maybe I'll get some white out, or maybe a black marker or something, but first I'll read this green card that was part of what I sent out to Principal Dan Bertrand at Canelan High School when I thought I had been fired. So this pocket primer displays a nameless summary of letters to Duquesne principals, Duquesne being DuPage and Kane counties. So DuPage County and Kane County combined together. This pocket primer displays a nameless summary of letters to Duquesne principals regarding school busing supervision, to Duquesne residents or professionals, on June 3rd, 2005, from Frank Datillo at the P.O. Box regarding student safety and well-being during pupillage and onerous supervision tangling school bus drivers. Regarding, I already read that. Copies of this went out to some civil authorities, some educational authorities, the Teamsters Union, the Amalgamated Transit Union, those supervisors who are named as saboteurs in some of my letters. So I actually sent this out to the supervisors who I had my issues with, so that they could be up to date. So some civil authorities, the unions, and some those supervisors via or perhaps, what's it say? Redirected from the Batavia branch of Laidlaw. So, dear Duquesne residents or individual or professionals, I was employed as a school bus driver for more than 2 years, and my employment was terminated by my former employer on December 19th, 2003. Yes, I remember it was just as Christmas vacation had started. Mid-level officials, and I should probably say that I probably wasn't really terminated. It seems that termination letter that I received on December 19th had been, or that I received soon after December 19th, if they mailed it on December 19th. Anyhow, the letter that I received was probably forged, because the email address does not seem like a legitimate email address, but instead is associated with a porn site. So let's go back to reading. On December 19th, 2003, mid-level officials can subject school bus drivers and students, because the school bus driver is driving the students, so mid-level officials can subject school bus drivers and students to treachery, even from afar. Some supervisors seem secure in the school busing industry, despite their very offensive behaviors, some of which includes sabotage. I continue to feel such security is too hazardous. In other words, the saboteurs feeling secure in their jobs, that's too hazardous. I continue to feel such security is too hazardous, and accordingly, I continue taking hiatus from the industry despite enjoyment, and compliments received. In other words, there were parents who would compliment me. There were other bus professionals who would compliment my work, but I just did not feel safe at that company anymore. Last year, so I'm continuing to read, last year I sent to many principals letters cautioning about school busing industry supervisors glibly encumbering professionalism. Some supervisors have sometimes behaved as saboteurs in the operations at the Batavia branch of Laidlaw. I hereby inform you that within at least part of the year 2003, a routing coordinator of special needs, an assistant routing coordinator, and a field and safety supervisor sometimes behaved as saboteurs to the operations at the Batavia branch of Laidlaw. I feel bus companies can effectively resist harm against pupils by pledging, as recipients of the public's trust, we will be ethical and responsible in everything we do. I hope you'll seek such pledge from each entity integral to the civilized education of your pupils. And then the one asterisk refers to the combination of Kane County and DuPage County as being called Duquesne. And the two asterisks mean refers to not fewer than 3 supervisors. So up here where I said some supervisors, what I was referring to was not fewer than 3 supervisors. And then it's signed as of July 4th, 2005, by me, Frank Datillo, sincerely Frank A. Datillo, former bus driver, defrauded, distressed, and libeled into wrongful termination by some employed by my former employer. So now I'm going to go ahead and open that, and hopefully there will be no names on what's inside, so that I don't have to mark it up. But I'm interested in seeing what I put in that envelope, because apparently what I put into that envelope is not just a named version of this. It's something different. And I'm also recognizing right now that in reading this, I didn't make any mention. This letter here did not make any mention of where I came up with why I keep saying that the school bus industry festers with what is the words? Festers with this is not good. Like I said in the previous videos, I'm really tired. Not tired, not sleepy, but just mentally drained from reading these things. Networks of predators. Festers with networks of predators. And if it doesn't say it in the letter here, I'll just let you know right now. It's a big reveal. It was one of the police officers who I spoke with who said, you know, Frank, I think this would all make a lot more sense to you if you understood that the police thoroughly comprehend that the school busing industry festers with networks of predators. So there you go. There you have it. Even if the letter doesn't tell us that it was a police officer who said that to me, now you know that it was, in fact, a police officer who introduced me to the concept of the school busing industry festering with networks of predators. And that's how I figure that, plus my own experience, I figure roughly 1% of the school busing industry Yes, this does have names on it, so I am not going to read this. And it doesn't even mention anything about the police officer who had mentioned the networks of predators. Like I said in the previous video, I'm really not interested anymore in I can turn this camera around now. Let's get me on camera. Whoops, we're still zoomed in. Zoom us out. Okay, so like I said in the previous videos, I'm really not interested anymore in protecting students from those 3 supervisors. I'm thinking if my letters didn't help protect those students, reading it right now isn't going to help them any more than what I've already submitted to the authorities. But now what I'm trying to do is protect students from what I'm guesstimating is roughly 3,000 predators who might be involved in that network of predators who the police officer said the school busing company festers with. Now, he did not say 3,000. He just said that the that the police know that the school busing industry, that's how he said it, the school busing industry festers with networks of predators. And when he said that, it made sense to me why people would be so willing to engage in sabotage at the school bus company, especially since I had been making waves by telling police and other officials about what this safety supervisor was doing. Why she would behave so irrationally. So at this point in time, what I'm trying to do is protect students or make parents aware that I would agree with that police officer that the school busing industry does fester with predators, networks of predators. Oh, and he also said, festers with networks of predators who are nearly impossible to get rid of, or very difficult to get rid of. I'm kind of summarizing what he said, but he indicated also that they are very difficult to get rid of. Obviously, I wasn't difficult to get rid of. They sent me a letter that had been forged, and I was gone for about 17 years, 19 years or so. I'm not one of those that's hard to get rid of. Now I might be more hard to get rid of now that I know what the stakes are. But he indicated that the networks of predators involve people who are nearly impossible to get rid of. So, in other words, the school busing industry tries to get rid of them, but can't. Probably because they're all lawyered up. And if you think about it, think about other groups that are also very highly lawyered up. The porn industry relies on lawyers extensively. The school busing industry relies very heavily on lawyers. You probably don't know. I found out with my other school bus company that sometimes school busing companies are so hard to insure, to get insurance on their vehicles, so that insuring those vehicles can be so costly that it's actually more cost effective for them to ignore the entire insurance industry and just create their own insurance company to insure their school buses, their school busing business. I found that out when I tried to send a letter to my former employer's insurer, thinking that, hey, if I can tell the insurer what the safety supervisor is doing, they'll recognize that as an unsafe behavior and they'll put a stop to it. Well, then I found out that the insurer was actually created by the school bus company. So again, many school bus companies, they might seem like mom and pop shops. Many school bus companies are multinational corporations. And if you want a kind of comical insight into the viewpoint that I'm looking through after having talked with that police officer who said that, Frank, I think it would help you understand if you knew that the school bus industry festers with networks of predators who they can't get rid of, who the school busing industry can't get rid of. I think it would help you rent yourself a copy of Disney's Pinocchio and just recognize that when Jiminy Cricket says, after all, how much trouble can a little boy get into on his way to school? That's a pretty insightful, that's a pretty well thought out statement by Jiminy Cricket in the Disney version of Pinocchio, and that Rossi knew what he was talking about when he wrote Pinocchio. That's all I'm going to say for right now. Again, if you think that there's a possibility that if you believe that the school bus driver that your child is riding with might be part of a network of predators, you really don't want to engage in vigilante justice. I would say that a better option would be to contact your principal, or if you feel more comfortable contacting local police, they might be helpful. State police might be even more helpful, given that if your school bus driver drives in different cities or different villages, your local police department might not be able to address what happens in your neighboring village, whereas a state police officer, I believe, might be more able to piece together what's happening in your village and what's happening in a neighboring village. So a state police, talking with state police might be more powerful for you than talking with local police. But if you feel very comfortable talking with a local police officer, maybe that's your best bet. If you feel very comfortable talking with a principal about the situation, maybe that's your best bet. But vigilante confrontation of the school bus driver, I would say, is not your best bet. I would say a better strategy is to give the bus driver enough rope to hang himself. Obviously, in doing that, you wouldn't want to create an attractive nuisance, but I would say a better strategy than vigilantism is give the bus driver enough rope to hang himself, and get other people involved, like the principal or the local police department or the state police department. Speaking of vigilante justice, there's another kind of justice that I'm very quick to point out to my students, and that's called school bus justice. And what I'm doing there, when I describe to my students school bus justice, I'm trying to disillusion my students. My goal when I talk about school bus justice is to help them realize that school bus justice is never going to be perfect. The odds are stacked against school bus justice being perfect. One of the things, it takes a couple of sentences to explain to the kids, but one of the things that I point out is in most jurisdictions, the justice building, the courthouse, costs in the millions of dollars. The school bus doesn't cost in the millions of dollars. The judge making the verdict is paid a lot more than the school bus driver. The lawyers are paid a lot more than the school bus driver. On the school bus, when the school bus driver is trying to repair a situation so that things seem fair for the students who got involved in a conflict, know that school bus driver is actively driving a vehicle when the conflict occurs and doesn't have the luxury of lawyers or high pay or a courthouse in handing out the verdict. Doesn't even have the luxury of excess time. The school bus driver has to get those students to school in a reasonable amount of time, or else they're going to be taken off that route. Be late, arrive late to school enough times, and you'll be taken off that route. So, one of the first things that I point out to the students is school bus justice is not going to be excellent justice. Almost certainly. School bus justice will not be excellent. But what the driver says the students need to adhere to so that we can get the kids to school in a reasonable amount of time. And I think most parents can understand what I've just said. I hope it might open up your, help you realize that, if you think that the school bus driver has not been fair to your student, to your child, there might be a good reason for that, and it's just that the school bus is not set up to act as a courthouse. So it's the goal is to get the kids to school, and then if the students really feel that they've been cheated, they can talk it out with a teacher, with a principal, in a stationary building that's not trying to avoid other vehicles. I hope that makes sense to you, so that you can kind of cut your school bus driver some slack if you think that your school bus driver has been unfair. Part of the reason why that's so important is because the school bus industry acknowledges that there's no quicker way to create a behavioral issue within a student than for the student to feel that he's been treated unfairly. So, given how important it is for students to feel that they've been treated fairly, I'm very quick to point out to my students that school bus justice can very easily become disappointing to students. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope you won't try to engage in vigilante justice regarding any offenses that you think your school bus driver may or may not have been involved in.